Welcome to the Rick Bork channel, where the beer is always cold, the language fucking sucks, my shit's always broken. Your opinion doesn't matter, and Borkfest 2022 is July 29th and 30th, so come on over and fucking just, yeah, whatever. You got RSVP by the end of May, though. By May 31st, Memorial Day weekend, you have to fucking, by Memorial Day weekend, you gotta RSVP, or otherwise you're fucking out. So, have you ever wondered how to fix plastic? 99% of people have something broken that's plastic and they don't know how to fix it. So they leave it broken or throw it the fuck away. We got a plastic fender flare that's a little, it's been dinged up, so we got a couple clamps on there holding the cracks together. You can see one there, little piece there that's missing. But we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna plastic weld those cracks back together. And I'll show you exactly how. All right, so I'm gonna make this the simplest way that I can show you how to do a plastic weld repair. And you don't need to get into buying anything super fancy. This here is a Portasol butane soldering iron. You don't have to have one this fancy, but this one certainly helps because it's portable. You don't have the cord, and it's compact, it's easy to work with, and it works well in a variety of other applications that we can take care of later. And the cheapest zip ties you can buy at the dollar store, the hardware store, whatever. The cheapest ones they have. Because it doesn't matter if they break. So in this application, we're going to go ahead and we turn our soldering iron on, indicated by the little glowing flame in there. I'm going to set it down here. Hey, we gotta wait a little bit for that to heat up, and we'll discuss a couple of things. This is kind of what I'd call a compound break. Crack runs here, runs down to right in that area, and then it runs around the side of the fender as well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start here, and I'm gonna weld that T-joint, and then I'm gonna come up here to the top, and we'll work our way down, come down here to the bottom, and we'll start there. So you can throw your zip ties down there whenever, however. If you have an adjustable soldering iron, you're gonna want to turn that bad boy all the way up. Just like if you're welding steel, penetration is gonna be key here. So what I'm doing is I'm taking and I'm feeding the zip tie into the hole that I'm melting into. If you're not getting penetration, all you're doing is putting plastic on the surface. It won't make any difference. You won't actually be making a repair here. So you can go ahead, because that's still malleable, I'm going to come down a little bit from that T-joint, start working my way in again. We could have came up and across the T-joint. It wouldn't matter too much, but again, just make sure you're penetrating below the surface. Otherwise, again, all you're doing is kind of putting a band-aid on it. It's like trying to duct tape it. It won't work very well. Then we'll start working around the fender. The crack that runs perpendicular. Then you're gonna get some smoke, and you're gonna get all that, and it's gonna look a little rough. You can go back and smooth it out if you want, however you need. So we have that. I want to be able to, you see that? It popped it apart. So we didn't have good penetration there. And it probably wasn't cool enough. That plastic stays hot for some time. I don't that anybody is familiar with TIG welding that's not familiar with welding plastic, but it's the same principle. Heat, you're feeding the rod with your opposite hand. Takes a little eye-hand coordination. You can see I'm laying down a pretty good bead on this. Oh, we dropped our zip tie. My phone's going off like crazy over there. It's not ringing, so it must not be that important. So we get to this point up here. We really want to be able to burn this in, because this is where it's going to start to crack back again if we don't head off the crack. So we really want to be able to put some filler in there. And there's a fine line between what you can melt in and what you can't. So there's that kind of that seam. The next step, this bottom crack down here is actually underneath. I'm gonna try to get you down in there. You can see right here where the end of that crack is. I want to come down about a 1/2 inch. Start working that. And if you can get beyond a 1/2 inch beyond the crack on either end, you're better off. Now I have to work underneath this clamp. All right, so this one, we're actually welding in a 90-degree joint here because it's split all the way up. And then the crack continues out here. In that technique, I'm going to gap it at a 45, but you got to make sure you melt in a good distance on both pieces. And then the reason that you melt in and then drag back, so you're pushing the material back into the hole that you made and just keep working forward. And then keep feeding material. That's what builds your surface. So it brings it up above the surface on the plastic. That way, if you want, you can bring the surface back down. And I'll show you how we can do that on this other weld that we did over here on this side. But this one's a little bit different in the aspect that we have to approach a little bit different. So I'll kind of try to show you that here. We can get some light going and maybe not be so shadowed. I don't know. We're gonna try to, I'll try to show you what I got going here. If it'll work with me. Come on now. There. Okay, so once again we start up our portasaw. I gotta wait a couple minutes for it to get warm. Make sure you got the glow going on there, otherwise you're just leaking butane into the air. And that stuff's not cheap. So I should be actually starting up on this far end and working down. So maybe we'll move you up here. And now you're in your own shadow, so that doesn't work. And I'll try to zoom you in in the editing and see if we can make it work that way. You can almost going backwards by pushing it with the tip. Instead of dragging it back, I'm pushing it. This one's going to require a lot more filler than a flat. Joint. You can kind of come back and turn your point and kind of flatten that out if you so choose. Depends on the how much you want to put into it here. We can do it this way too, where we're just, ow! Yeah, watch that vent side of that portisol too. It'll burn the out of your fingers. Kind of like to go through on this one, cut that groove ahead, come back and fill it with your filler material. Again, just keep working that material in there. It's going to take substantially more material to weld a 90-degree joint than it is to weld a flat joint. It's kind of whichever way works best for you, however you can kind of fill that material in there. Make sure you're actually melting it in though, not just dropping it on the surface. So I'm going to weld this one up, and then I'll show you how we get to clean these up, kind of make them look a little bit more presentable. We'll go from there. All right, so if we get back to finishing this surface, and we can feel that crack on the inside. We can feel through there. It should be a pretty good seam. If you look over here on that 90-degree seam, it looks like we glued it, siliconed it. This still looks like the same thing. A couple different ways we can do this. Most commonly, a person's going to have one of these laying around, and particularly on your corners and stuff. Now this plastic's hard now. You're going to have to come in here and you can start shaving on that. You hear how hard that is? It's tempered, just like if you were welding. It's going to have some temper to it, but you can take and shave that off like that. You can also use razor blade scraper. That doesn't have a blade in it right now, but it would have a flat razor blade on it, and you would come along and work that surface. That way, a good sharp carpenter's chisel will do the job for you pretty nicely, actually, particularly with the higher spots. You can come in and take those off. Take a little time. You can also use a file if you wanted. You could take a file to it and rasp that off, but you're gonna have to clean your file a lot. In my instance, I got power tools. So this is, again, I know I plugged this thing a lot, but this little cordless, I call it a die grinder, they call it a polisher. sanding disc. That might be a little abrasive. Go slow, because it's going to take that material off in a hurry. And remember, you can always put more material on, so if there's a spot that's below the surface, don't be trying to get in there and work it out. Fire that soldering iron back up and put a little more material back in it. So this is probably super aggressive for what I'm doing. If we go to like this is like a Brillo style pad, that's a little less aggressive. It's not going to take the material off as fast. It's also going to leave you a finer finish, but it's going to take longer. So what I'd like to do is take this green disc, put that on there, and knock the surface down. It's like your different grits of sandpaper if you're familiar with sanding. Again, go slow. So you see that? We're getting close there. Now go back to this Rolock, this Brillo disc. I wish they had numbers on the backs, but they don't. You can go find them at your local parts stores. That one we can go try to kind of blend it a little bit. Now you can see there's these voids here. We can go back and fill those with plastic again, and come back. It'd just be just like doing body work. We fire up our soldering iron again, and I'll show you. We just touch these things, and some of them we don't even need much for filler because there's just enough left on the surface here that we can move it around. But for structural purposes, it's actually going to help to fill these in. And we used, in comparison from a 90-degree joint to a flat joint, we used just over 1 zip tie to do all of this, versus about the same length. We used almost 4 on that one over there. So we need a little bit more heat. You can usually see it'll start smoking off the tip. You can see that once it's ready. You can melt it, get it to stick to the tip. This is where you'd probably want to maybe adjust your temperature so you're not burning into the fender anymore. You're basically just applying to the surface. A little bit there. Just melt it off your filler. If you're doing color specific plastic, or you want color specific plastic weld, then get color specific zip ties. You can pretty much get them in every color of the rainbow. So there's a little bit of a valley in this fender, so I'm going to try to build that surface a little bit. Again, we're only surface applying here. That's it. Don't be, you can always apply too much. Take it back off again. There you go. So once again, we have to let that cool. And if you're doing multiple breaks like I am, I can come over here and work on this one. The only reason I'm going to do this one a little bit, I'm only going to take this one down rough. I'm not, if it was my personal application, I would just leave it the way it was. Other than knock it down with this disc, just for scratch purposes, young kids, there's some pretty gnarly little spots on there, so just for that, I'll knock it down for that purpose. But as far as cosmetic appeal goes, I personally don't care. I'm just showing you guys how to get a little bit more, maybe a little bit more appeal out of it if you're looking for it. And a sharp edge is going to leave you a smooth finish, where the sanding, regardless of how fine you are, is going to leave you a rough, or it's going to leave a matte finish, I guess you'd say. You'll pretty much never duplicate that surface there unless you media blast it. If you get it smooth and then media blast it to blend it in, you can probably get it to match. So we're gonna let that set, and then we'll come back and we'll buff it out, and I'll show you the finished product. Okay. So there's that level. Go back to this one. You gotta move around a lot or it gets hot and you'll start melting the plastic. You can feel it if it's getting hot. You can also use a wire brush on this. It will give you, remove some material for you, and it's similar to buffing paint. And that you're going to use heat to move that material around a little bit. So it cools off. Do it again. So you can keep going through, keep polishing that more and more, blending it. For me, that's more good enough. A guy could take the fender off if you really wanted to and weld the inside as well. It would give it more strength. But you'll notice here where the size of the crack didn't increase, but I purposely made a larger weld on the end to try to prohibit that from cracking again. If I smack a tree real hard, that's going to be your weak point, because that plastic is more brittle. It's tempered versus being pliable like the rest. But you can see right now, we can flex it pretty good, and it's not cracking. So it's relatively simple to weld plastic. It's relatively simple to blend it in if you so choose, or you can leave it the way it is. When you get to your ends, just make sure you terminate them and weld them very well, because otherwise the crack continues to spread after the fact. So there you go. It's a simple deal, but not everybody knows how to do it or isn't comfortable trying it. It's not a real big deal. You shouldn't be starting any fires or anything like that. Just watch the hot tip. Don't burn yourself. That's it. Try it out. You can always add more material. If you burn through, add more material. It's not that much different in welding, other than welding's a whole lot hotter. If you guys like what I'm doing, throw me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't. Ring the bell, get my notifications. Memberships are down there if you want one, and I do appreciate it, because it does really help us out on the channel. We got more videos to come on this, guys. I'll see you again next time.